No nanny survived a day with the billionaire. CEO's triplets until the black woman taught him the truth about love. Before we dive in, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? Right now, type your city in the comments so we can see just how far this story reaches. And when we get to the end, I dare you to rate it from 0 to 10, because this one might just break your heart. Now, sit back and enjoy the story. Inside the grand Whitaker mansion, the luxurious living room looked nothing like a palace. It looked like a war zone. Velvet pillows had been ripped apart, feathers floating through the air like fallen snow. Three little boys, the billionaire CEO's infamous triplets, screamed at the top of their lungs, hurling books and vases as if chaos was the only language they knew. "We don't want a nanny, we want our mother." The cry cut through the gilded halls, striking straight at the raw wound that lingered in this house of wealth yet aching emptiness. 17 nannies had already come and gone in just 6 months. None of them lasted longer than a single day. But then the door opened, and she walked in, not trembling, not flustered. She simply stood there steady and met the boys' blazing eyes with her own calm gaze. Then, in a voice so soft it silenced the entire room, she whispered, "I know your pain, because I once lost everything too." In that fragile moment, amid the storm of feathers and fury, a spark of hope flickered to life. Could this woman be the only one strong enough to reach the shattered hearts of a billionaire's children, and perhaps heal the man who had already given up on love? The woman who was different. Perched high on the hill, the Whitaker mansion shimmered in glass and steel, reflecting the golden sunset of the glittering city below. But inside those walls, the air was colder than an abandoned house. Laughter had not lived here since the day Sarah, the wife, the mother, was gone. In the vast living room, three identical pairs of blue eyes glared at Belinda with a mixture of fear and defiance. Tommy, the eldest, only 6, yet already carrying himself with the stiff shoulders of a soldier. Danny, the sensitive one, clutching a battered toy like a shield against the world. And little Bobby, the youngest, lips trembling, yet his eyes heavy with the terror of being left behind. Once again, Belinda Johnson, 30 years old, stepped quietly into their world. Not a businesswoman, not a therapist, just a nanny. A woman who had once grown up in an orphanage, who knew too well what it meant to lose everything. But unlike the 17 who had come before her and fled, Belinda did not back away. She knelt down, lowering herself to meet their gaze, and in a voice as gentle as a prayer, she whispered, "I know the pain you're carrying, because I lost my parents too, at an age far too young to understand why the world could be so cruel." The room fell silent. The boys froze, their anger faltering, and in that golden haze of sunset, for the very first time, the ice wall around their hearts began to crack. That was the moment fate turned, when an ordinary woman stepped into the dazzling world of a billionaire CEO, carrying with her the one thing money could never buy: genuine compassion. And it leaves us to wonder, could someone who doesn't belong to that glittering world be the very key to healing a broken family? Tell me, what do you think? Could love truly come from where we least expect it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Part 1. The Battlefield. Inside the mansion. The Whitaker mansion was worth millions, yet tonight its living room looked more like a war zone than a palace. A sofa had been overturned, chair legs splintered, and the once pristine velvet cushions ripped open, feathers whirling through the air like a blizzard of white. Across the polished hardwood floor, streaks of red, orange, and lemon yellow paint glared back, as if someone had turned the marble walls into a mural of chaos and grief. In the center of it all, 6-year-old Tommy, his eyes far too fierce for his age, hoisted a heavy metal toy truck and hurled it down. The crash rang out like a declaration of war. "Go away. We don't need any nanny," he shouted, his voice breaking, half anger, half swallowed tears. Behind him, Danny clutched a torn pillow like a weapon, flinging it toward the door. Feathers exploded around him, hiding the flush of rage burning across his small face. And Bobby, the youngest, staggered forward, tugging a crystal vase off its shelf. It shattered on the floor, scattering 1,000 glittering shards that sparkled under the chandelier's light. Beautiful, but as dangerous as landmines. From the doorway, Belinda stood motionless, her heart tightening. This was the moment every nanny before her had fled, the instant when the mansion's grand room became a battlefield. and 3 little boys transformed into soldiers defending themselves against yet another intruder. But Belinda didn't flinch. Her eyes followed their every move, not with fear but with understanding, because she saw more than their chaos. She saw the pain hidden inside their fury. Behind the screams, she recognized 3 fragile hearts drowning in a loss too heavy for children to bear. The mansion echoed with their cries bouncing back from the towering walls. Yet it wasn't just the sound of rebellion, it was the sound of grief, sharp and unhealed, reverberating through every corner of the house. Tommy stepped forward, his flushed face set like a tiny commander. His blue eyes blazed, but in their depths, Belinda caught the flicker of something raw, something trembling, fear disguised as rage. "You'll run away too, everyone does. Mom left us, and you will too." His words cracked, breaking between defiance and confession. Danny's voice followed, softer yet quivering with anguish. "We don't need anyone. We just want Mom back." He squeezed a toy car so tightly his knuckles turned white. In his gaze, Belinda didn't see rebellion. She saw terror. And Bobby, the smallest of them, all pounded his little fists against the floor, sobs, tangled with fury. "Go away if you stay. You'll leave us too." Belinda drew a long, steady breath. Each word cut through her like a blade, because once, long ago, she had screamed the very same things. She remembered standing in the ashes of her childhood home, an orphan with nothing left, begging the world not to abandon her again. Slowly she stepped forward. Her shoes brushed against broken glass, the soft crunch echoing in the silence. She didn't look down. Her eyes never left the boys. And in that moment, Belinda no longer saw 3 wild children. She saw herself at 7 years old, alone, trembling and lost, crying into the emptiness, afraid no one would ever stay. The air grew heavy, thick with the sorrow of 3 small boys. Their tears hid behind anger, and the mansion itself felt like a wound bleeding silently. Any ordinary nanny would have screamed, stormed out, or called their father in desperation. But Belinda did none of those things. Instead, she sank slowly to the floor, lowering herself until her eyes were level with theirs. The movement froze the room because for the first time someone was willing to come down to see the world through their eyes. "You think I'll leave just like the others?" Belinda's voice was soft yet steady, unshaken. Tommy's jaw clenched. "Yes, everyone does. Nobody ever stays." Belinda nodded, not with denial, but with something far more dangerous, empathy. "I know that feeling, because when I was 7, I lost my parents too. My house burned down. One morning I woke up and everything was gone. Just the way you lost your mother." The silence that followed was suffocating. Danny's little car slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. Bobby lifted his round, tearful eyes, hesitating. You didn't have a mom either." His small voice trembled. Belinda smiled, though her eyes glistened with tears. "No. I woke up once and the world felt empty. I used to scream, throw things, or push people away because I thought if I made them hate me first, they'd leave before I loved them too much." Her words sliced through the frozen air, shattering the wall of ice around their hearts. The boys didn't yell this time. They just stared, silent, searching as if hearing their own pain spoken out loud for the first time. Feathers drifted down, like snow, the chandelier's light catching in their slow fall, casting the moment in something almost holy. 3 pairs of blue eyes locked on Belinda. No shouting, no chaos. Only fragile silence where trust was still a question. It was Tommy who broke it, arms folded tight across his chest. "You're just saying that to stay. Tomorrow you'll leave too. Just like the 17 before you." Danny's tear-stained face hardened with defiance. "You don't know what it's like when we scream all night. You'll run away too. Everyone does." And little Bobby, his voice no louder than a whisper, spoke the cruelest truth of all. "If you leave, I'll hate you forever." Belinda drew in a slow breath. Each word was a dagger, but she didn't look away. She only opened her hands on her lap palms upward, not touching them, just an invitation. "You have every right not to believe me. Too many promises have been broken, but hear me now. I will not leave. You can scream, you can make a mess, you can even hate me, and I'll still be here, because I know anger is just how little hearts protect the pain inside." Tommy's eyes flickered. He then picked up the toy truck he had hurled moments ago and lifted it high, testing her. Danny and Bobby froze, waiting to see. Belinda didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Her gaze stayed calm, warm, unwavering like a small flame steady against the storm. Tommy's hand trembled, then dropped. The truck clattered to the floor with a dry thud. His face didn't crumble, but his hand shook his knuckles bone white. Danny lowered his head, tears spilling freely into the feathers scattered across the floor. Bobby's sobs broke the silence, his small voice quivering. Mom's gone. Everyone leaves us. Everyone. Belinda's chest tightened. She saw not wild little rebels, but 3 broken warriors, their wounds laid bare. Slowly she reached out both arms, not demanding, not forcing, just offering. Danny was the first to yield, letting his shoulder brush against her arm. Bobby hesitated, then curled his head into her hand with a trembling sigh. And finally, as if a glacier cracked, Tommy leaned in, just barely, just enough, his small shoulder brushing hers. Belinda gathered them all, her voice breaking, yet firm as a vow. Listen to me. I cannot bring your mother back, but I can stay. Every day. Through the anger, the fear, the tears, I will not run, because your pain is the same pain I once carried too. The mansion was silent. Only small hiccuped sobs broke the air, and under the chandelier's golden light, the cold room softened. It no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like the fragile beginning of something else, something healing. For the first time inside the ruins of war, there was peace. And for the first time, a seed of trust was sown. Do you believe that a single honest promise can break through even the strongest walls of anger? Share your heart in the comments, because maybe once you wished someone had stayed too. Part 2. The Challenge. The mansion still echoed with chaos, but now it wasn't the sound of shattering vases or ripped pillows. It was the raw scream of a child's breaking heart. We want our mom. Tommy's cry ripped through the grand hall, his young voice cracking like thunder against marble walls. The sound rolled up the sweeping staircase, bounced off the polished wooden floors, until the whole house became nothing more than a chamber, amplifying grief. Danny covered his face with his hands, shaking his head as though the echo itself hurt down to his bones. Bobby sobbed, pressing his palms over his ears, desperate to block out a truth no child could ever escape. That cry for their mother, one they already knew would never be answered. Belinda sat quietly amidst the storm. Feathers clung to her hair and shoulders, yet her eyes stayed gentle. Her chest ached because she knew this cry too well. Once in a different place, she had shouted the same desperate words, I want my mom, eh? And no one came. She understood then, this wasn't defiance. This was longing, clawing at the emptiness of loss. Her voice was no louder than a whisper, but it carried through the silence. No one can replace your mother, but someone can stay. Tommy's eyes still burned like fire, but beneath the blaze, Belinda glimpsed a whirlpool of despair threatening to spill over. He stepped forward, his small frame rigid, yet his gaze sharp with a wound too deep for 6 years of life. He pointed at her, voice cracking with rage and grief. You don't understand anything. You're not my mom. You're just paid to be here. You'll leave like everyone else, and when you go, it'll hurt worse. Danny's sobs followed, clinging to his brother's arm. No one wants us. They all pretend to care. Then they walk away. And Bobby, smallest, most fragile, spoke words that froze the air. If you stay, you'll die like our mom did. The room fell deathly silent. Those words weren't defiance, they were pure, unshakable fear. Fear of daring to love only to lose again. A chill ran down Belinda's spine, but she didn't turn away. She couldn't. Because if she faltered now, she would become just another broken promise in their long, painful list. She took a breath, her voice tender but unwavering. Tommy, Danny, Bobby. You're right. I'm not your mother. No one can ever take her place. But listen to me. You don't deserve to live with the fear that everyone will abandon you. I will not leave. You can scream. You can push me away. You can even hate me. And I'll still be here. Because anger is only the armor little hearts wear to protect their pain. The silence pressed heavier. Tommy's lips drew so tight they split with blood. His small hands gripped the toy truck until his knuckles turned white. His eyes, once burning with rage, now flickered with something else, something rawer. His voice shook. What do you know about loss? Have you ever watched your mom walk out the door and never come back? Danny broke again, weeping into his brother's shoulder. Bobby hiccuped through his sobs, and then Tommy's dam burst. He screamed until his voice cracked. That day, she promised she'd be back soon. She said she was buying a gift for Dad. I watched from the window. I saw her car drive away. And then, there was a knock at the door. They told us she would never come home again. His words shattered the room. Danny wailed, choking on tears. We waited, but she never came back. Dad works all the time. The nannies leave. It's just this house. Just us. Bobby whispered the final knife to Belinda's heart. If we love you, you'll disappear too, just like she did. Belinda's tears fell freely now, but she didn't hide them. This wasn't weakness, this was truth. She let them see her ache because in this moment she was hurting with them. She dropped to her knees, gathering their trembling bodies close. Her voice trembled, but each word was steady as a vow. You don't deserve to live in that fear forever. I can't bring your mother back, but I can stay. And this time no one disappears the moment you begin to believe. For the first time, the three warriors let their tears fall without shame. Not screams, not fury, just grief, pure, unguarded, and human. And in Belinda's arms, something fragile bloomed. Not trust, not yet, but the first faint crack in the walls of despair. Do you believe that grief shared can slowly become grief healed? Or does loss always linger, no matter who stays? Share your heart in the comments. I promise your words matter here. The vast mansion had gone still save for the muffled sobs and the heavy breathing of three broken children. Belinda held them close, her arms wrapping around their small shoulders as though she could shield their fragile hearts from the storm still tearing inside. After a moment, she lifted her gaze, her eyes wet but gentle, steady. Do you think you're the only ones who know what it feels like to be left behind? Three pairs of tear-stained eyes blinked up at her. Tommy frowned, wary, not yet understanding. Danny's crying slowed, caught between grief and curiosity, and Bobby, still leaning into her chest, tilted his head just enough to listen. Belinda drew a shaky breath. Her voice trembled, but the truth in it rang clear. When I was 7, my parents died in a fire. One morning, my whole house turned into flames. I escaped, but they didn't. I stood on the sidewalk watching everything I loved burn, and I knew I would never again hear someone call out, "Belinda, dinner's ready." From that day on, I screamed too. I want my mom, I want my dad. But only silence answered. Danny's small hand flew to his mouth, his eyes wide. Tommy's fist clenched tighter, and Bobby whispered through a crack in his sobs, just like us. Belinda nodded, smiling faintly through her tears. Yes, just like you. I used to think no one wanted to stay with me either, so I pushed people away. I yelled. I tried to make them leave before I loved them too much. I thought it would hurt less that way, but in the end, it only made me lonelier. Her words filled the grand hall not as a lecture, but as truth torn straight from the scars of her own heart. And slowly, so slowly, the fire in the children's eyes dimmed, replaced by something far more fragile: recognition. Belinda let the silence breathe, let the weight of her confession settle. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with the trembling courage of someone walking a razor-thin line between being trusted or being cast out. She reached a hand toward Tommy, the eldest, the fiercest, the most wounded. Tommy, you can hate me, scream at me, push me away, and I'll still be here, because I know behind that anger is just a little boy who misses his mom so much it hurts to breathe. Tommy's lashes fluttered. His blue eyes shimmered with tears he refused to let fall, and he turned his head, hiding his face. Belinda turned to Danny, the sensitive one, his small hands trembling. Danny, you can cry every single day, and I'll sit right beside you for as long as it takes, because tears don't make you weak. They only prove that you once loved deeply. Danny hiccuped, clutching his ragged pillow, but his gaze lingered on her, for the first time daring to believe a promise. Finally, Belinda bent down to Bobby, the youngest, the most innocent, his fear still trembling in his eyes. Bobby, you're afraid that if you love someone, they'll disappear, but I promise you I won't. Even if you scream and tell me to leave, I'll stay, because real love means staying. The boys said nothing. Their small chests rose and fell with ragged breaths, but in their silence something new flickered, a hairline crack in the wall of rejection they had built. The golden chandelier cast a soft glow over them, no longer harsh and cold, but warm, cocooning. It wasn't a war anymore, not Nanny versus wild children. It was something closer to family, fumbling its way toward healing. Belinda pulled the boys tighter into her arms, whispering a vow, meant for them and for herself: I will not abandon you, no matter what happens. And for the first time, the silence in the Whitaker mansion wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence of hope. Do you believe a single promise to stay can save a child's heart from despair? Share your thoughts in the comments, because maybe once you wished someone had whispered to you, no matter what, I won't leave. Part 3. The Woman Who Didn't Run. The grand mansion was silent, heavy enough to hear a pin drop. Torn pillows lay scattered, feathers drifting like snow, and the crystal chandelier shone down on shards of broken glass, turning the room into a stage for an invisible war. A war between rage and the desperate hunger to be loved. Belinda lowered herself, slowly kneeling on the cold floor. Her simple dress brushed against dust and feathers, but none of it mattered, because in this moment she wasn't a nanny, and she wasn't a grown-up. She was simply someone willing to meet 3 little boys at eye level. Her gaze lifted, gentle but unflinching, meeting Tommy's fiery blue eyes, Danny's tear-soaked face, and Bobby's trembling stare. The boys hesitated, stepping back in surprise. No one had ever lowered themselves for them. Adults shouted from above, ordered, punished, or walked away. But this woman was kneeling. Do you know why I haven't run? Belinda's voice was low, steady, carrying a quiet strength. No answer. Tommy clenched his jaw. Danny clung to his ragged pillow. Bobby's wide eyes darted, suspicious, as if waiting for a trap. Belinda inhaled, her eyes shining with tears. Because I understand you, more than anyone. I understand what it feels like to lose your parents. The words pierced their wall of defiance. Tommy stiffened. Danny lifted his head, startled. Bobby blinked hard, not trusting what he had just heard. The silence that followed wasn't defiance anymore. It was anticipation, waiting to see if this woman truly knew the pain they lived in. Belinda swallowed, her voice dropping to a whisper that still filled the grand hall. I was only 7 when I lost both my mom and dad. A fire. In a single night, I went from a child with warm arms around me to an orphan with no one left to call my name. Tommy's brows knitted tighter. Danny straightened, listening. Bobby's small hands twisted in the hem of his shirt, his breath caught. Belinda's words trembled, each one pulled from a scar deep inside. I remember standing on the sidewalk watching flames eat my home. People whispered pity in their eyes, but when I screamed, I want my mom, I want my dad, only the fire answered back. The first tear slid down Danny's cheek. Tommy turned his face away, fists clenched, chest rising fast. Bobby sniffled, his wide eyes locked on Belinda as if searching her for truth. After that, Belinda whispered, they sent me to an orphanage. That first night I hid in a corner and told myself, if I push everyone away, if I make them leave before I care, then I can't be abandoned again. Because no one would stay long enough to matter. Her eyes found Tommy's as if she could see herself in him. A faint, aching smile touched her lips. I thought anger would protect me, but all it did was make me lonelier. In that stillness, 4 sets of eyes locked 1 woman and 3 children. And for the first time, they saw she didn't just say she understood their pain, she had lived it. Tommy shot to his feet, his small frame shaking. His face was flushed, his eyes blazing with defiance and something far more fragile, fear. You're lying. You're not us. You don't know how much it hurts. You're not our mom, you'll never be her. Danny flinched. Shrinking at his brother's outburst, Bobby clutched his pillow tighter, panic rising in his little face. The air turned tense, sharp enough to choke, but Belinda didn't flinch. She stayed on her knees, her voice steady, her eyes locked on Tommy's. You're right. I'm not your mom, and I never will be. No one can replace her. She'll always be the only one. But she leaned forward, her words soft yet fierce, a lifeline thrown into the fire. What you're doing, shouting, breaking things, I understand. Because I did it too. I screamed, I don't need anyone, but deep inside I wished just once that someone would be patient enough not to leave. Tommy's body trembled. His lips pressed so tight they bled. His blue eyes blurred with tears he refused to let fall. Belinda's voice dropped, trembling, but true, Tommy. You're not bad. You're just hurting. And I see that pain. I'm not here to replace your mother. I'm here to make sure you don't have to carry it alone. For a heartbeat, his small shoulders faltered. He didn't collapse. He didn't cry out, but a crack appeared in the armor of his rage. Danny and Bobby watched in silence, eyes darting between their brother and the woman kneeling before them. And in that fragile moment, something shifted. Anger didn't drive her away. For the first time, it drew her closer. Do you believe children can recognize truth, not in words, but in the courage of someone who refuses to leave? Tell me in the comments, because maybe once you too prayed for someone to stay. The mansion was hushed now, heavy with silence, so still you could almost hear a pin drop. Torn pillows littered the floor, feathers drifting like snow, and the chandelier cast golden light over shards of glass. It was a battlefield, but not of broken furniture. It was a battlefield of grief and love, colliding in the hearts of 3 small boys. Danny could no longer hold back. His ragged pillows slipped from his arms, his tiny fingers trembling as they twisted in his shirt. His eyes, clear and wet, locked on Belinda, as though searching for something he'd never dared believe in. I miss my mom so much. His voice cracked like glass shattering in the vast hall. Every night I close my eyes hoping she'll come in my dreams, but she never does. I'm scared. Scared I'll forget what her voice sounds like. The confession silenced everything. Bobby broke down sobbing as he threw himself into Danny's arms, burying his face against his brother's shoulder. Tommy stood frozen, his face flushed, trying to be strong, but his clenched hands trembled so violently it betrayed him. Belinda's heart twisted with their pain. She didn't reach for comforting words. Instead, she opened her arms wide and simply waited. No force, no pressure, just a quiet place to land. Danny was the first to give in. He collapsed into her embrace, his sobs shaking his small frame. Bobby followed instantly, his little arms locking around her waist as though afraid that if he let go, this woman would vanish. And then Tommy. He wavered, his eyes shining, fighting a war inside himself. But the ice cracked. One step, another, until finally he let his head rest just barely against her shoulder. 3 trembling bodies curled into her arms. And for the first time in months, the cold mansion knew something new, the fragile warmth of safety. Belinda closed her eyes, tears falling into their tangled hair. Her whisper was soft but steady, like a lullaby for their wounds. Cry, my loves. Cry as much as you need. I'll sit here with you. Until the fear runs out, the storm of sobs soften, fading into quiet hiccups and unsteady breaths. They stayed nestled against her as if they had finally found the one place where they didn't need to wear the armor of anger anymore. Belinda tilted her head back toward the vaulted ceiling, her eyes wet but brighter than ever. She knew this moment was a turning point, fragile, sacred. If she faltered now, the trust she'd earned might vanish like smoke. So she held them tighter, her voice dropping into a vow, each word in rhythm with her pounding heart. Listen to me. I'm not your mother. I never can be. But I can do one thing. Stay. Tomorrow. The day after. And every day that follows. Even if you scream. Even if you push me away. I will not leave you alone. Tommy lifted his head, eyes glistening. He wanted to scoff, to shout again, but his lips only quivered before pressing shut. Danny pressed his face into Belinda's chest, clutching her shirt like a lifeline, and Bobby, smallest of all, looked up through blurred lashes and whispered, "Do you really promise?" Belinda laid her hand gently over her heart, smiling softly though her eyes were fierce with truth. "I promise, and I will keep it." The chandelier's golden light fell over the scene, a woman kneeling on a marble floor, 3 wounded children in her arms, and a vow stronger than any contract money could buy. A vow not of duty, but of staying. And in that promise, something stirred. Not just in the mansion, not just in the hearts of 3 little boys, but in the hearts of everyone watching, reminding us that when one person refuses to run, it can be the beginning of a new kind of family. Have you ever wished that in your darkest hour someone would stay and whisper, "No matter what, I will not leave"? Share your thoughts in the comments, because maybe this story just touched a memory inside you too. Part 4. The Helpless CEO. John Whitaker stood motionless before the glass wall that stretched from floor to ceiling. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, his gaze heavy as he stared down at New York City glittering in the night. From the 45th floor of Whitaker Industries, the skyline looked like a painting of gold and fire. Endless streams of traffic lit the streets below. Neon signs flickered, and towers of steel and glass reached skyward, proud and defiant. This was the empire he had built billions in, worth a name that echoed power and success. And yet, among the millions of lights, John's heart lived in darkness. He gripped the rim of his untouched whiskey glass, his breath falling heavy. 17, he muttered hoarsely, as though counting every defeat carved into his soul. 17 nannies, 17 failures. Not one had lasted longer than a day inside his mansion. One had called the children demons. Another had fled at midnight, leaving behind a scrawled note, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." John remembered the whispers at board meetings, the mocking glances, how the world marveled at his ability to command a corporation, but pitied his inability to command his own home. The humiliation was never on the headlines. It lived inside the mansion itself, where 3 little boys turned their grief into war. He closed his eyes and Sarah's face came back. Her smile, her eyes that seemed to read him without a word. Her hand always resting on his shoulder when the weight of the world pressed down. You can conquer the world, John, but don't forget, family is home. But she was gone. And John, the man who had climbed higher than anyone else now, stood powerless inside the ruins of his own house. He sank into the Italian leather chair at the center of his vast office. Stacks of reports lay spread across the desk, quarterly earnings, flawless contracts, figures that painted a picture of perfection. His empire ran like a machine, but his thoughts refused to stay on paper. Instead, the memories replayed 17 bitter scenes. The first nanny, barely a week after Sarah's funeral, had bolted from the house, her face pale with fear. "Mr. Whitaker, I can't. Those children look at me like I'm the thief who stole their mother. They scream her name in the night. I can't stay." The third, an older woman from London, known for her discipline and her pride in raising aristocratic children, lasted only 2 days. On the second night, Tommy hurled a glass to the floor, shards flying as he screamed, "You're not my mother." She left the next morning, her note bitter. No salary in the world is worth such hatred. The eighth, a spirited young woman who believed she could turn any child into an angel, barely survived dinner. Bobby had climbed onto the table shouting while Danny slipped silverware into his pocket to scare the nanny. She broke down in tears and fled. "They don't want love," she sobbed. "They want to destroy anyone who tries." And the 17th, that memory cut deepest. John had come home late from a meeting only to find luggage waiting by the front door. The nanny's face was tired, her voice flat with defeat. "I've never heard children curse their own father before. They said you killed their mother. I can't endure this." John's chest tightened. The words echoed even now like a curse he could never escape. He remembered standing outside their bedroom that night, hearing his eldest son scream through tears, "Daddy killed Mom." If it wasn't for the birthday gift, she wouldn't have gone out, and she wouldn't have died. John buried his face in his hands, his broad shoulders trembling. And in the golden hush of the 45th floor office, the man who had signed billion-dollar contracts felt smaller than the weight of 3 broken hearts he couldn't fix. Have you ever seen someone powerful on the outside but powerless where it mattered most at home? Do you believe even the strongest leaders can collapse when faced with love and loss? Share your thoughts in the comments. John sank back into the leather chair, his eyelids heavy as memories rushed over him like a tide determined to drown. And in every memory, Sarah was still there. He could still see her smile, that gentle curve that could turn even the worst day into peace. He remembered the first time she walked into a boardroom. He was a young, restless CEO, then tense under the cold eyes of wealthy shareholders. Sarah was no executive, no heiress, just an interior architect hired to redesign the company's main lobby. But the way her gaze found his across the polished table, he hadn't felt alone in years. "You can conquer the world, John, but never forget, there's one place you must never lose: home." The words haunted him now, because Sarah had died. On his birthday. It wasn't some random tragedy. It wasn't fate playing cruel tricks. Sarah had gotten in the car that day to buy him a surprise gift. On the highway, the rain came down hard, the tires lost grip, and everything ended. From that day forward, John couldn't look into his children's faces without feeling the flames of guilt rise up inside him. Tommy never spoke it aloud, but in his son's eyes, John saw it clearly. They believed he was the reason their mother was gone. So he buried himself in work. $1 billion contracts, Endless flights, lavish parties, all distractions, all masks, anything to keep him from walking into that cold mansion where Sarah's laughter once lived. But every night when he returned, he still heard it, the muffled sobs of his sons through their closed doors, each one a knife to the heart. John pressed both hands to his face, his voice breaking into the silence of his office. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I had everything, and I lost the only thing that mattered." A tear slipped down, falling onto the polished wood of his desk. There, framed in glass, sat a photo Sarah in the center, radiant as sunlight, their 3 children clinging to her sides and John standing proudly just behind them. Once, it had been proof of a family unbreakable. Now, it was evidence of everything he had failed to protect. The next morning, the 45th floor of Whitaker Industries blazed with light. Dozens of LED screens flashed charts, stock prices, and financial forecasts. Staff moved briskly across the polished floor, the entire office running like a flawless machine. And at its center stood John Whitaker, the man Wall Street never took its eyes off. His gray tailored suit was immaculate, his navy tie knotted with precision, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His gaze was cool, his stride decisive. Before his board and investors, there were no cracks. He outlined a plan to expand into Asian markets, spoke of a $12 billion merger, and ended with a single confident line: "Whitaker Industries will not only endure, we will lead." Thunderous applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. John's carefully rehearsed smile never wavered. To the world, he was power incarnate, the man who never lost. But when the boardroom doors closed, silence pressed down on his broad shoulders. John sat heavily, reached for his phone, and found 3 messages from the butler. Master Bobby refused to eat. Tommy shattered the window glass. He's screaming for his mother again. Danny won't go to school today. His chest tightened. In that instant, all the power, all the billions meant nothing. He wasn't a titan of finance. He was just a father. Failing. The desk phone rang. His assistant's voice came through crisp and professional. "Mr. Whitaker, CNN is ready for your live interview. They'd like you to speak about balancing family and business. You're considered a role model for young entrepreneurs." John let out a low laugh, sharp and bitter as unshed tears. Balance. How could he speak of balance when his home was chaos, his children drowning in grief? That night, after giving polished, empty answers on live television, John drove his Bentley back through the quiet streets. The mansion loomed in the distance, proud and cold, a fortress of stone and silence. He braced himself for the usual storm, the shouts, the breaking glass, the endless echoes of loss. But tonight, there was none. Instead, he heard something else, a voice, soft, unsteady, yet warm in a way that pierced the silence. John froze at the threshold, listening. In the living room, the scene made him stop breathing. His 3 boys sat quietly on the rug, no shouting, no smashing, just watching. And there, kneeling before them, was Belinda. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, a worn guitar resting against her knee. Her voice cracked at times, but it carried something rarer than perfection. It carried pain, made gentle. "I know you miss your mom. I lost mine too when I was 6. I screamed. I broke things. I hated the world because I thought no one could ever understand. But one day, someone sat beside me. They didn't scold me. They didn't leave. They just held my hand and said, 'You are not alone.'" Bobby stared, lips trembling, as if to repeat her words. Danny buried his face into a pillow, but for the first time his shoulders weren't shaking from sobs. And Tommy, the fiercest, the loudest, sat with eyes rimmed in red, but without the blaze of fury that usually lived there. John's heart clenched. His throat tightened. 17 nannies had walked through that house. 17 had fled. But this woman, this stranger, was sitting on the floor carrying their grief with her own. For the first time, John realized something his billions could never buy: wounds do not yield to money, only to a heart brave enough to stay. He drew in a sharp breath, his eyes stinging. And in that quiet room filled with brokenness and one woman's promise, John Whitaker, the man who had thought hope long dead, felt the first fragile spark of it flicker to life. If you were John, able to hold the world in your hands, yet helpless before the tears of your children, what would you do, seeing a stranger melt the ice around their hearts? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because maybe this story speaks to something deep in you too. Part 5. The Unusual Candidate. The interview room sat on the third floor of the Whitaker mansion, a space Sarah had once designed to be a quiet reading room. Walnut-paneled walls rose high shelves of books touched the ceiling, and a wide glass door opened to the garden beyond. Once serene, the room tonight was heavy, thick with tension. John Whitaker sat in a leather armchair behind a gleaming mahogany desk. His face was stone, his eyes unreadable. Beside him stood Mr. Brown, the butler, with a notebook in hand. And across from them sat Belinda, the only woman after 17 failures who still dared to take the chair reserved for a nanny candidate. She wore a simple navy dress, no excessive makeup, her dark hair falling softly at her shoulders. But it was her eyes that filled the room, warm, unwavering, with a quiet fire that no storm could snuff out. John flipped through the thin file in front of him, his voice low, steady, almost dismissive. "You hold no special degrees, no record with elite schools, no experience in homes like this one. So tell me, why should I believe you will last longer than a few days?" Belinda inhaled, then lifted her gaze straight into his. "Not timid, not defiant, just steady, because I don't see 3 troublemakers. I see 3 children in pain, and children are never bad. They're just broken." The room fell silent. Her words dropped like stones into a still pond rippling through the air. John's eyes flickered just slightly. For months he had heard the same lines repeated. They're wild, they're impossible, they hate everyone. But here for the first time someone named it for what it was, grief. He set the file down, his hands folded, and for the first time in years he had no ready reply. His fingers tapped lightly against the desk. His gaze sharpened, the kind of look that usually made opponents squirm, stammer, reveal weakness. But the woman before him sat tall, composed, as if she'd spent her whole life preparing for this very moment. His voice dipped lower, edged with challenge. "Do you know that in the past year, 17 women sat in that chair? They all began with compassion. They all swore they could handle it. And within days, each of them fled, leaving behind tears, screams, and another fracture in my children's hearts. So tell me, what makes you different?" Belinda's brown eyes softened, but within them, a light deep and steady as a candle in the dark. "I'm different because I didn't come here to fix them. I came to listen. Others treated your children like a problem to solve. I see them as hearts longing to be held. I don't fear their anger because I've lived inside anger myself. I know it's nothing but grief in disguise." John's grip tightened on the armrest. Every word pierced the armor he had built around himself, but his face betrayed nothing. His reply came sharp, deliberate. "You do realize who you're speaking to, don't you? I don't need emotional speeches, I need results. Can you promise me they'll behave, that they'll be obedient?" Belinda smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but with empathy. "No, I can't promise obedience. What I can promise is that they'll believe they're loved. And when a child knows they are loved, they will learn gentleness on their own." The words struck John like a blow. His chest constricted. It was Sarah's voice all over again. "You can conquer the world, John, but don't lose inside your own home." For the first time in years, John's gaze faltered. The edges of his resolve blurred, and beside him Mr. Brown gripped his notebook tighter, knowing without a doubt that something in this room had shifted. John leaned back in his chair, arms folded across his chest. His eyes were sharp, probing, cutting through the air like glass. He'd heard enough pretty words, enough polished philosophies. What he wanted was proof of steel, because his children weren't a puzzle to be solved. They were a storm-wild, merciless, able to swallow anyone whole. His voice was slow, deliberate, a blade sliding across the mahogany desk. "Suppose one morning Tommy shatters the windows, Danny screams himself hoarse, and Bobby hides under the bed, refusing to eat. All 3 against you at once. What do? Run for the butler, call me, or quit like every other one before you?" The room sank into silence. Mr. Brown, standing at John's side, stole a glance at Belinda. This is the question, he thought. The question that broke them all. But Belinda didn't rush. She drew in a breath, set her hands calmly in her lap, and lifted her gaze to John's. Her voice was steady, low, anchored. "I'd sit down in the middle of that chaos. I'd let them scream, let them throw, let them cry. And I wouldn't leave, because children don't need instant victories. They need someone strong enough to witness their pain without running." She paused, her gaze holding his like a quiet dare, And when the storm subsides, I won't ask, why were you so bad? I'll ask, how much do you miss her? And I'll let them answer however they can, through silence, through tears. Only then will they open a door for someone to walk through. The silence that followed was heavier than marble. John's throat tightened before he could stop it. For a split second he saw it, his 3 boys, their reddened eyes, their trembling hands, and in their faces he saw himself too, a boy who once longed for a father's embrace and never received it. His fists clenched unconsciously. He should have dismissed her, but her words, they were the only ones that hadn't sounded like failure. Brown's lips curved the faintest smile in years. For the first time he glimpsed a spark of light flicker across the CEO's stone face. John sat in silence for a long while, eyes narrowed, weighing her, and then his voice dropped low and merciless. You talk so much about pain. What gives you the right to claim you understand mine? Have you ever lost something so deep it destroyed your childhood? A cruel question, direct, ruthless. Brown flinched, ready to intervene, but Belinda lifted her chin, her hands clasped tight in her lap. Her reply was quiet, but it landed heavy, each word a stone falling into the room. When I was 6, my parents died in a car crash. I sat in the back seat. I saw the lights, heard the metal twist, then silence. In one night, I lost everything. No mother's arms, no father's voice. They sent me to an orphanage. And in those first nights, I screamed. I broke things. I threw whatever I could, just like your children. But what I was really saying was simple. Don't leave me. The room froze. Only the ticking of the old clock filled the air. Belinda's eyes shimmered, but her gaze stayed steady. I know what it feels like when the person you love most disappears. I know the terror of lying awake in the dark, whispering, who will love me tomorrow? I didn't learn this from books, Mr. Whitaker. I lived it, and that's why I will not leave your children to live it alone. John turned toward the window. Outside, the city pulsed with brilliance, the night sky broken by towers of glass and light. But his eyes didn't see the empire he had built. They saw a boy, a younger John, sitting in a cold, quiet house, aching for a father's arms that never came. His hand brushed his face, covering the faint glisten at the corner of his eye. For the first time in years, the armor of the invincible CEO cracked. Brown lowered his gaze, exhaling softly. In his heart, one thought bloomed like a prayer. Perhaps this woman is the missing piece this family has been waiting for. Do you think someone who has walked through the same pain can heal wounds no one else can touch? Or are some losses too deep to ever be mended? Share your thoughts in the comments. The room felt frozen, as though even the air was holding its breath. John sat motionless, one hand resting on the polished mahogany desk, his eyes fixed on the woman across from him. He was used to candidates who came with fear in their voices or ambition in their eyes. But Belinda had neither. She spoke only with truth, the kind of truth that had torn her childhood apart and was now reaching out to mend his children's. John drew a long breath and set his pen down. His voice was low, no longer the icy tone he had worn like armor, but something softer, something closer to admission. You said, children aren't bad. They're only hurting. And you've walked that road yourself. Belinda nodded gently. No pride, no performance, just the quiet affirmation of someone who had lived every word. A silence followed, and then for the first time in months, John let slip words that surprised even him. Perhaps this family still has a chance. The line fell into the room like a fragile note trembling in the heavy air. Mr. Brown blinked, his throat tightening before lowering his head. The corner of his mouth twitched just enough to reveal how deeply the moment struck him. Belinda's hands tightened in her lap. Her heart squeezed, but she didn't rush to answer. She knew this was not a moment for words. It was a moment for silence, for letting hope take root. John turned away, his gaze falling to the city lights, sprawling beyond the glass. For years, that glow had been nothing but a reflection of power, wealth, control. But tonight, for the first time, another light stirred within him, not from numbers, not from empire, from something smaller, fainter, but infinitely more human hope. He knew the road ahead would be brutal. The storms would return. His children would test, fight, resist. But for the first time, he no longer felt utterly alone. And in that soft, unguarded admission, perhaps this family still has a chance, the ice began to melt. A man once defined by conquest was learning the power of compassion. If you were John, after so many failures, so many broken attempts, would you have the courage to trust an ordinary woman like Belinda? Leave your thoughts below. And give this chapter a rating from 0 to 10. Part 6. A different first day. The sound echoed through the ground floor like the drums of war, the clatter of spoons, bottles banging, and shrill laughter full of defiance. When Belinda stepped into the kitchen, the scene before her was enough to make anyone turn and flee. The long wooden table was smeared with sticky brown syrup. Bottles of maple syrup lay overturned, the thick liquid spilling down onto the floor like streams of honey. Danny swung a wooden spoon, flinging syrup high into the air so that it splattered across the white cabinets. Bobby crawled along the floor, drawing circles with syrup as if it were some kind of game, and Tommy, the ringleader, stood atop a chair, holding up the last bottle and shouting, "This is syrup war. Whoever dares to fight us will be stuck forever." Their laughter rang out, mixing with the cloying sweet smell that filled the room. Any ordinary nanny would have screamed, panicked, and gone to find help. But Belinda simply stood in the doorway for a few seconds, silent, watching. Her heart raced, but not from fear. In the chaos, she heard a message. They weren't just misbehaving. They were crying out. She stepped inside her shoes, pressing into the sticky floor without a wince. Her voice carried across the room, not raised, not pleading. A war, sounds serious. But don't the greatest generals know that every battle needs a peace feast in the end? 3 little heads whipped around. Tommy narrowed his eyes. No nanny had ever dared step into the battlefield like this. Belinda smiled and set down the small basket she carried. From it came a gentle, sweet aroma. Cookies still warm, wrapped in a simple checkered cloth. The room froze for a moment. Curiosity flickered in the children's eyes, breaking the rhythm of chaos. Belinda pulled out a chair and sat down right in the middle of the syrup battlefield, as if the sticky mess on the floor didn't exist. Her gaze was level with theirs, not towering, not begging. Danny smirked and deliberately flung more syrup her way. Brown streaks splashed across her dress, but Belinda didn't flinch. She only adjusted the basket and unwrapped more cookies dotted with shining chocolate chips. "You know," she began softly, like she was telling a secret, "back at the orphanage we played war too. But we didn't have syrup to draw circles. We used soot from the firewood stove. Our hands were black, our faces smeared. And back then we thought we were having fun." 3 pairs of eyes blinked at her. Tommy tilted his head, challenging. "So did you win or lose?" Belinda chuckled, her gaze drifting far away. "No one won, because when the laughter stopped, we went back to cold beds. No mother to tell us a story, no one to hold us. Every battle feels empty when there's no one left to wipe away your tears." Bobby, the one crawling on the floor, suddenly froze. He stared at his sticky hands, lips trembling but silent. Danny glanced sideways at Tommy. The chaos faltered, leaving behind an unfamiliar hush. Belinda seized the moment, holding out a cookie toward Bobby. Instead of fighting, "Why don't we try eating peace?" That image of a woman sitting in the middle of a syrup battlefield, dress stained, speaking of a childhood without a single embrace, struck like lightning. This wasn't a nanny versus unruly children. This was a broken soul, reaching out to 3 shattered hearts. Bobby stared at the cookie in Belinda's hand. The warmth still seeped through the cloth, the buttery sweetness mingling with the scent of melting chocolate chips filling the sticky kitchen air. He sniffled, ready to turn away, but his small stomach growled, betraying him. Tommy's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp as a blade. "Don't eat it. It's a trap. She's just like the others, pretending to be kind, then leaving." Belinda remained still, her gaze calm as a lake. She didn't push, didn't defend herself. She simply replied softly, "You don't have to trust me. But the cookie is real, and it won't disappear, even if you refuse it." For a moment, Bobby hesitated. Then his syrup-sticky hand reached out and grabbed the cookie. Chocolate smeared on his fingers as he took a bite, and his eyes widened. Danny burst out laughing. "Look at him. He acts like he just found treasure." Tommy stiffened, slamming the syrup bottle against the table, but Belinda didn't turn to him. She calmly placed another cookie on the table between the brothers. "If you want to try, this one is for you." Danny raised a brow, smirked, and shrugged. "Fine, I'll try, but that doesn't mean we like you." Belinda nodded, her smile light as a breeze I know. "People don't need to like each other right away. Sometimes they just need to not be hungry anymore. Danny bit into the cookie and the room grew quieter. Only the sound of crunching remained alongside Tommy's conflicted glare, a storm of anger and something else he couldn't name. The sight of a child accepting a cookie of peace didn't just calm the kitchen, it stirred the hearts of those watching, because in that moment they saw children starve for love even as they fought against it. Tommy's chest burned as he watched his brothers eat, his eyes blazed, lips trembling with rage, tangled in fear. To him, it felt like betrayal. "Stop," he shouted, yanking the cookie from Bobby's hands and hurling it to the floor, crumbs and chocolate scattered across the syrup-stained tiles. "Don't you remember Mom's never coming back? And no one can replace her. No one." The scream cut through the fragile peas like a blade. Danny dropped his half-eaten cookie. Bobby broke into sobs, shoulders shaking. But Tommy's storm raged louder than any tears. His fists clenched so tight his nails pressed into his skin. They all come, then they leave. They pretend to be nice, pretend to care. But in the end, they vanish. Just like Mom, just like Dad. The accusation struck the air like thunder rattling the walls of the vast kitchen. Belinda froze. In Tommy's eyes she saw her younger self, an 8-year-old, screaming in the orphanage yard, "No one loves me." She drew a steady breath, her heart aching, then slowly knelt down so her eyes met his. No rushing to soothe, no denial. Just a whisper, trembling but firm. "You're right, no one can replace your mother, and I never intend to." Tommy froze his breath, jagged, his eyes glimmering on the edge of breaking. For the first time, doubt flickered in his storm. If she doesn't want to replace Mom, then why is she here? His words had been daggers, but Belinda's answer, "I won't replace her," was the first stitch in a torn heart. As Tommy trembled, Belinda tilted her head, her voice low and warm, like a fire in winter. "Tommy, do you know I once screamed? Just like you, I screamed. Why did Mom leave me? Why didn't Dad come back?" The three boys lifted their heads. Danny and Bobby stared, mouths open. Tommy's eyes widened in shock. Belinda swallowed back the lump in her throat and continued. "That day, snow was falling thick. I stood at the orphanage window, watching families choose children. They picked the pretty ones, the smiling ones, and I was left behind. I shouted that I didn't need anyone. But at night I cried until I couldn't breathe because all I wanted was a hug." Tommy's fists loosened, his fury melting into a trembling confusion. His voice cracked with disbelief. "You didn't have a mom either?" Belinda nodded. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but her smile remained gentle. "Yes, and that's why I understand your pain. I'll never be your mother, but I can be here to listen, to wipe away tears, to walk with you through each day. Not as a replacement, but as a companion." The heavy air began to thaw. Danny lowered his head, quickly wiping his eyes. Bobby stepped closer, clutching the hem of Belinda's dress like a small branch, reaching for support. And Tommy, though his face stayed hard now, carried a fragile crack in his shield. Belinda placed a hand over her chest. "I don't bring miracles. I only bring a real heart. Whether you accept it or not, that choice is yours." Her confession pierced the audience like a blade of tenderness. A woman who had lost everything, choosing to use her wounds to heal children, drowning in the same loss. The TV screen went black, and the room sank into a strange silence. Only the ticking of the old wall clock remained steady, heavy, like it was counting each heartbeat. Tommy sat there, his small hand clutching the hem of his shirt. 10 years old, yet in this moment his eyes looked far older than his age. Those damp pupils reflected the figure of his father standing before him. Then suddenly, his voice cut through the stillness, clear, sharp, like a blade. "Dad, are you ashamed of us?" The room froze. Danny's mouth fell open while Bobby immediately buried himself in Belinda's arms, sobbing. Belinda herself went still, her hand tightening around Bobby, as her gaze flicked to John, waiting for his answer. John stood rooted to the spot, blood turned to ice. That question dragged every headline, every boardroom whisper, every judgmental stare down upon him like a crushing weight. His knees buckled not out of humiliation, but because his strength gave way. Eyes red, he looked straight at his eldest son, his voice trembling. "Never. I have never been ashamed of you. Not once. I am only ashamed that I failed to protect you from the cruelty of this world." Tommy's lips pressed tight. He turned away, but his small shoulders betrayed a tremor. For the first time in his memory, his father, the powerful CEO everyone revered, was on his knees, admitting helplessness, sharing in his pain. Tears welled in Belinda's eyes. She whispered just loud enough for all to hear, This is what the children need, Mr. Blackwell. Not a CEO, a father." The question, "Are you ashamed of us?" struck the audience's heart like lightning, because it wasn't just the fear of 3 children in a story, it was the wound of countless sons and daughters longing to be accepted and loved without condition. After the heavy silence, Belinda placed a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder, then stood reaching out to all 3. "Come on, let's make cookies. Let the world call you whatever it wants. But here in this kitchen, you're just children who need a little sweetness to wash away the bitterness." Danny hesitated. Bobby wiped his eyes, and after a pause, even Tommy slowly placed his hand in hers. Together they followed Belinda out of the living room, leaving John kneeling in the fading light. From the kitchen came the sounds of clattering pans, the scent of melting butter and warm vanilla spreading down the hallway. Laughter rose timid at first, then freer, brighter. Bobby was the first to giggle, then Danny, and finally Tommy, just a faint curl of his lips, but with a glow of warmth sparking in his eyes. John stood at the doorway, his shadow long against the floor. The man who once commanded tens of thousands, who signed billion-dollar contracts with steady hands, now simply watched in silence. And in his eyes, Belinda was not just teaching children how to bake. She was doing what he could, not healing. For a fleeting moment, Tommy looked up and caught his father's gaze through the kitchen door. No words passed between them, but the look alone answered his question. "Dad, are you ashamed of us?" And this time Tommy knew the answer was no. Belinda slid the tray of cookies into the oven, then turned softly, her voice gentle as a breeze. "We won't let the world decide who we are. We will write our own story." The warm glow of the kitchen, the sweet aroma of cookies, the sound of children's laughter mingling with the tearful eyes of a father. This was the scene that left the audience breathless, because within it, they saw the reflection of their own families, broken perhaps, but still aching for a place of warmth to return to. If it were you, what would you do when the world branded your child with a cruel name? Stay silent or stand and fight for them with everything you have? Share your thoughts in the comments. Part 8. The Threat of Losing Them. That morning, the Blackwell mansion held no laughter, no trace of last night's sweet cookie scent. The air was heavy, sliced apart by the endless headlines and reports presenting evidence that the 3 children were living in an unsafe environment. Then came the knock, sharp, deliberate, unyielding. Bang, bang, bang. The housekeeper rushed toward the door, but John was already there. He pulled it open, and standing on the threshold were 2 officers from Child Protective Services. A stern, middle-aged man holding a thick file, and beside him a younger woman, her eyes cold but tinged with faint pity. "Mr. Blackwell," the man said, his voice clipped and dry, "we've received multiple complaints. We need to evaluate the children's living conditions." The entire mansion seemed to freeze. John's jaw tightened, rage flashing in his eyes. He had never feared losing a company or a billion-dollar deal. But losing his children, the very thought crushed his chest like a fist around his heart. Belinda appeared from the hallway, Bobby's small hand clutched in hers, Tommy and Danny following close behind. When they caught sight of the CPS badges, all 3 instantly gripped her tighter, clinging to her like a final lifeline. "We didn't do anything wrong," Tommy blurted, his voice cracking with fear. "We're not the monsters they show on TV," the younger woman faltered. Her eyes darted toward Belinda, catching something unusual there, not panic, not fury, but a calmness laced with sorrow. Belinda knelt, pulling Bobby close as he began to cry. Her voice was gentle yet steady, every word clear enough for all 3 to hear. "No one has the right to decide who you are except you. Speak your truth. Let them see your hearts." John clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened, then finally stepped aside, allowing CPS in. The city's most powerful man, who could silence lawyers and rival CEOs, could do nothing here. This was not a battle in a boardroom. This was war inside his own home. The knock of CPS didn't just bring the threat of separation, it ripped open the primal fear of any parent, any family, the terror of being torn apart, judged before the truth could surface. The grand living room, once a sanctuary of leather sofas and marble floors, became a courtroom. The children were no longer heirs in a mansion, but witnesses under scrutiny. The CPS officer set his thick file on the table, his tone detached, almost mechanical. "We only want to hear from the children. Do you feel safe in this house? Has anyone hurt or neglected you?" Tommy sat straight, his hands gripping so tightly they turned pale. He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the polished tiles. Then suddenly, he looked up, eyes blazing through the tears. "We're not bad kids. We just miss our mom." The words pierced every heart in the room. Belinda's hand flew to her mouth while John turned away, jaw trembling. Danny, the youngest, stammered, voice shaking every night. I look out the window, waiting for her to come back. But no one comes. I hit my pillow. I scream, just to forget. I'm scared if I stay quiet, I'll forget her voice. The woman's hand trembled around her pen. She hadn't expected that the so-called demon Triplets could bleed such raw pain into words. Finally, Bobby, silent until now, lifted his tear-streaked face. "I break things, because I thought if I ruined enough, she'd have to come back to fix them. But she never did." The room drowned in suffocating silence. No scribbling pens, no clipped questions, only the sound of quiet sobs and the hollow gaze of children laying bare their truth in a desperate plea to stay together. John's body went rigid. Every word was a mirror reflecting back the truth he could not outrun. A father who had everything, yet could not mend the shattered hearts of his children. When Bobby confessed to breaking things just to make his mother return, no audience could hold back tears. What once seemed like reckless mischief was revealed for what it truly was, a child's last hopeless cry for love. The silence stretched on like a verdict, yet to be spoken. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, painting long streaks across the marble floor, circling the three trembling children. The CPS officer cleared his throat, ready to resume his notes, when Belinda suddenly rose to her feet. She stepped forward, eyes unwavering, her voice steady yet resonant. "Excuse me, but I can't allow the truth to be twisted any longer." All eyes turned toward her, John's, the children's, the two CPS officers. Belinda drew a deep breath, then knelt beside the children, laying a hand on their shoulders as if to anchor them. "These children are not bad. They are not defiant. They are in pain. They lost their mother in a terrible accident, and every single day since has torn another wound into their hearts. They don't know how to put it into words, so they scream. They don't know how to cry, so they break things. But don't call that bad. Call it what it is, a cry for help." Danny lifted his tearful eyes toward her, as if disbelieving that someone would dare speak for them. Bobby clutched at her sleeve while Tommy gritted his teeth, trying to hold himself together, though his lips trembled. The younger CPS woman blinked, something cracking in the hard glaze of her stare. The older man scowled, ready to cut in. "You're not their mother, nor their legal guardian." "What right do you have?" Belinda didn't flinch. Her voice deepened, pulling the entire room into its gravity. "I speak with the right of someone who once was an orphan. Someone judged, dismissed, told she wasn't worthy of love. I know what that feels like, how it tears you apart. And I swear I will not let these three children grow up with that same wound, unheard, unseen." The air thickened as if no one dared breathe. Even John felt the sting in his chest, watching this woman stand unafraid, not of him, not of the media, but only of these children being hurt again. Her confession of an orphaned childhood didn't just shock CPS, it resonated with the viewers, revealing that her pain was the very key that unlocked the children's chance at healing. John had sat silently, through it all, hands clasped tight, his gaze fixed downward as if calculating a billion-dollar deal. But this wasn't numbers. This was the fragile soul of his family. He had heard every word, the trembling testimonies of his children, Belinda's raw plea, and for the first time in years he realized he could not sit frozen like stone any longer. He rose to his feet. That single motion shifted the air, an invisible weight pressing into the room. The man once known as the billionaire CEO, whose very stare could silence a boardroom, now walked straight to the thick case file on the table. Planting both hands on its polished surface, John stared directly at the CPS officers, his voice booming like thunder, but breaking at the edges. "You think I don't see it? I've watched 17 nannies walk out. I've seen my children scream, destroy, collapse, and I was powerless. But don't you dare call them demon triplets. They are my children. 3 fragile hearts that lost half their world the day their mother died. Tommy's eyes widened. Danny and Bobby looked up, too stunned, seeing their father not as the cold CEO, but as a man on the brink, fighting to keep them. John swallowed, hard eyes reddening. You can say I failed as a father. Yes, I admit that. But don't you dare say these children don't deserve love. They are my everything. And I will not let anyone, be it the system or the press, strip away their right to believe they can grow into something good. The older CPS man faltered, his sternness slipping. His colleague slowly lowered her pen, tears glinting in her eyes. No one had expected this man, celebrated in the press as ice-blooded in business, to shatter so completely when speaking of his children. And when John confessed, choking, that he had failed as a father, the audience watching could not help but shiver and weep, for at last the mighty CEO was revealed for what he was, a broken man fighting to hold on to the only thing that truly mattered. The air in the room was so heavy that even breathing felt burdensome. The male CPS officer adjusted the thick file in his hands, forcing his voice to remain calm. Mr. Whitaker, we understand your emotions, but the law requires us to consider the children's best interests. After multiple reports, mounting media pressure, and 17 failed nannies, we must propose a temporary measure placing the children under trial guardianship outside this home. The words fell like a blade cleaving the air. All 3 children froze. Danny burst into sobs. Bobby clung desperately to Belinda's sleeve while Tommy shot to his feet, eyes blazing. No, we're not going anywhere. This is our home. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out raw and trembling. Everyone says we're bad, but no one ever asked how we feel. We miss our mom. We just want someone to stay. Dad can yell, he can be clumsy, but he's our dad. And Belinda, she didn't run. She listens to us. She understands us. Please don't take us away. Danny, choking on tears, added through sobs. If you take us away from Dad, who will tell us bedtime stories? Who will kiss us goodnight? Like Mom used to? Bobby, voice quivering yet firm. We don't need another house. We just need this family and Miss Belinda. Silence fell over the room like a veil. The female CPS officer discreetly wiped at her eyes while her colleague stared down at the file, as though searching for an escape. The most powerful plea hadn't come from the billionaire or the nanny. It had come from the 3 children themselves, wounded little souls who had finally found their voice. John turned to his children, eyes bloodshot, yet burning with pride he hadn't felt in years. Belinda too was overcome, her hand gripping Bobby's tightly as if making a vow, I will stay. The climax shattered the tension because at last the children were no longer seen as the problem, but as the answer to keeping this family whole. Part 9. Trust. Proven. The grand dining room, once cold and echoing only with the clatter of silverware and heavy silences, suddenly took on a different air. On the long, white-clothed table there was no fine wine or elaborate dishes, only roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a simple salad, and an apple pie Belinda had baked that afternoon. The chandelier's golden light fell warmly, no longer sharp and imposing, but soft, intimate, almost homelike. Tommy sat on the left, Danny on the right, Bobby in the middle, each with neatly placed plates before them. At the head of the table sat John, his top button undone, his tie loosened. The powerful man stared at the scene before him, and strangely it felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Let's eat, John said softly. His voice no longer carried command, but invitation. Danny mumbled, Dad, I want chicken with lots of gravy. Belinda smiled, placing a piece of chicken on his plate and spooning extra gravy on top. Everyone gets a share. No one is left out. Her words made the 3 boys pause. Their eyes met, then turned to Belinda. In that silence, something shifted, like a wall beginning to crack. John noticed everything. To him, Belinda's presence was like a small flame, pushing back the darkness that had smothered the house for so long. For the first time in years, he realized he hadn't heard laughter in this home. Bobby scooped up mashed potatoes and pushed them toward Danny. Here, take mine. I dropped yours earlier. Danny's eyes widened. John froze. It was the first time one of his sons had offered something without being told. A small act, passing potatoes, turned into a moment that hushed the whole table. It was proof wounds were beginning to heal. The candlelight flickered across the boys' faces, softening their usual defiance. Belinda watched them tenderly, then spoke gently. When I was your age, I had a dinner table too, but it wasn't like this. It was an old wooden one, shaky every time someone set down a bowl of soup. I ate with the other kids at the orphanage. Some nights all we had was a dry loaf of bread, but we shared it. Each of us wanted our friend to have the bigger piece, because when your friend smiled, you felt less hungry too. Tommy froze mid-bite, his eyes widening. Danny and Bobby stared blankly, trying to picture the world she described. You know what I learned? Belinda's voice trembled slightly. When you lose your parents, the scariest thing isn't going hungry, it's eating alone. Sitting at a table where the chair beside you is empty. It's cold. That's when I realized love isn't in the food. It's in sitting together, sharing together. Danny slowly set his spoon down, turned to Tommy, and whispered, "Take my chicken. I don't feel hungry anymore." Tommy blinked, stunned. The boy, who usually snapped at everyone, choked up not because of the chicken, but because his little brother had offered it first. Bobby quickly piped in, "Wait, I'll split mine. That way it's fair." A soft laugh broke the silence. Small, fragile, but enough to make John stiffen. He lifted his gaze, his eyes finding Belinda's. The candlelight danced in hers, shimmering deep. He realized she wasn't just teaching them how to eat. She was teaching them how to love. Inside John, something stirred, strange, overwhelming, and long forgotten. Hope. A simple story of an orphan's dinner table had broken the ice-turning silence into warmth and marking the beginning of families' healing. The faint clink of silverware against plates echoed through the dining room, but this time it didn't feel forced. The air around the table had changed warmer, almost like a family. Belinda rose and poured water into each child's glass. Her movements were slow, tender, as though performing a sacred ritual. When the glass was set before Tommy, the boy looked up. His eyes still held a trace of defiance, but deep within flickered something else, a hesitant spark. "Thank you," Tommy whispered so softly that John thought he had imagined it. Danny and Bobby both snapped their heads toward their brother, jaws dropping in disbelief before bursting into giggles. Tommy said, "Thank you, he really said it." "Miss Belinda," Bobby exclaimed, his cheeks flushed. Belinda smiled gently, her eyes shimmering, though she kept it hidden. She only touched Tommy's shoulder and whispered, "I heard it. And I believe it's the most beautiful thank you I've ever received." John sat frozen, his hand clutching his fork until his knuckles whitened. For nearly a year since his wife's death, not once had he heard his eldest son utter words of gratitude. Grief had turned the boy into a fortress of ice, and tonight that wall had cracked. He said nothing, only watched Belinda. Something broke open inside him, a swell of emotion burning hot behind his eyes. Tommy ducked his head, quickly pretending to focus on his plate, but at the corner of his lips a shy, fleeting smile appeared. To the outside world it was a simple thank you, but inside this house it was proof, the first evidence of healing. A small door opening to the possibility that love still remained. John still hadn't touched his steak. Usually, dinners ended in 10 minutes, swift, silent, treated like an obligation. But tonight, for the first time, he realized he didn't want it to end too quickly. He set down his fork, took a breath, and turned toward his 3 sons, Tommy, Danny, Bobby. His voice was deep, hesitant, as if a CEO had stepped onto a stage without a script. "I've never asked, but what's your favorite meal?" All 3 boys froze, staring wide-eyed. Since their mother's death, not once had their father asked them such a simple thing. Danny stammered, "Pancakes. I like pancakes." "Macaroni and cheese," Bobby blurted out, his eyes shining. Tommy hesitated, eyes dropping to his plate. His voice barely carried across the table, "Pizza, the kind Mom used to make." Silence fell. The words dropped like a pebble into a still pond, sending ripples of memory and grief through them all. John swallowed hard, his hand trembling as he nodded. His voice cracked. "I remember that. Next week, we'll make it again. Together." Bobby cheered first. Danny laughed with him, and Tommy pressed his lips tight, but his eyes betrayed the glimmer of hope he couldn't hide. Belinda's chest ached at the sight, not from sadness, but from witnessing a powerful man lowering himself. Not before rivals on Wall Street, but before his own children. John inhaled deeply. For the first time in months, he spooned salad onto his plate, then served Danny and Bobby as well. His voice wavered, but it was real. I'm learning to slow down, to make time to hear you laugh. A dinner that once was routine had become a turning point the night a father laid down the CEO mask to become simply a dad again. The crystal chandelier bathed the table in soft light reflected in the clear water of their glasses. None of them noticed that the atmosphere, once heavy and gray, had shifted, now glowing warm. Belinda raised her own glass, her voice as light as a whisper. Maybe we should toast. No wine, just water. To promise each other one thing, that this family will try again. John hesitated, then nodded. He lifted his glass, meeting each of his children's eyes. Tommy wavered for a moment, but Belinda's steady gaze guided him to raise his cup. Danny and Bobby lifted theirs high without hesitation, their faces bright. The soft clink of glasses rang out, delicate yet powerful enough to shatter the silence that had haunted the mansion for so long. For family, John murmured. For family. 3 young voices echoed clear and bright, filling every cold corner of the house as though awakening it. Tommy took a small sip, set his glass down, and whispered without defiance this time, I'll try, Dad. John turned away, unable to hide the glisten in his eyes. Belinda watched them, her heart trembling as if she had witnessed a miracle. Because sometimes saving a family doesn't require grand promises, just one quiet moment enough to remind everyone there's still hope. The sound of clinking glasses had become the beginning of a new vow, the rebirth of a family thought forever broken. Have you ever witnessed a tiny moment, just a thank you or the touch of a hand that changed everything? Do you believe those are the beginnings of true healing? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know how you'd rate this chapter from 0 to 10. Part 10, A Family Reborn. Late afternoon draped the mansion's garden in the glow of sunset. Golden light streamed through the leaves, scattering warmth across the hydrangea beds that had once been left untended for months. This was the place where Sarah, John's late wife, used to sit laughing with the children, her voice like music underscoring their fragile childhood. Today the garden was alive again, not with cries or tantrums, but with laughter. Bobby ran circles around the rose bushes, clutching a small bouquet of daisies. Danny carefully set chairs on the grass, arranging teddy bears as their honored guests. Tommy stood more quietly, eyes watchful, no longer burning with hostility, only waiting for something unnamed. John stepped outside. He wore a simple suit stripped of the cold edge of a CEO. His shoes were dusted from spending the morning helping the children clean the garden. In his hand, he carried a small navy velvet box. Belinda emerged from the back door in a plain white dress, her hair cascading softly over her shoulders. She stopped in surprise as the 3 children lined up, and John turned to her with a gaze she had never seen before. Not the commanding gaze of a powerful man, nor the weary look of a broken father, but the steady eyes of a man ready to give his heart again. Belinda, John's voice was deep, steady, but trembling. There's one place I never dared to step into since Sarah passed. This garden. But today I want you here. Because I believe if Sarah were alive, she would want to see this garden bloom again, with you in it. Belinda froze, her hand pressed to her chest. Her heart raced not only at his words, but at the children's hopeful eyes resting on her. In that fleeting moment, she knew grief was slowly being replaced by the seed of new hope. The moment John brought Belinda into the very place haunted by his late wife's memory, not to compare but to open the door to a new beginning, was enough to move both audience and characters to tears. Taking a deep breath, John looked at his children, their faces tense as if waiting for a miracle. Then he knelt down in the garden, on the very spot where Sarah had once planted the first seeds, and opened the velvet box in his hand. Inside, a diamond ring, simple yet radiant in the dying sunlight, gleamed like a small flame rekindled in his heart. Belinda, his voice faltered yet held steady. I once thought my heart had died the day Sarah left. I lived like a cold man, buried in work and power. But you did something I never thought possible. You reminded me that love doesn't die. It only waits for someone brave enough to awaken it. Belinda stood still, tears glistening her hand, covering her mouth as if to keep her sob from breaking the fragile silence. John pressed on, his voice breaking. I have watched you patiently embrace my children, holding even their anger and pain. You taught them and me that grief doesn't ruin a soul. It only waits to be soothed. And Belinda, I don't want you here as a caretaker, not as a shadow, in this house. I want you as the woman of this family. Will you be my wife?" The question floated into the garden, carried on the breeze that stirred the leaves. Danny's jaw dropped as he clutched his teddy bear tighter. Bobby leapt in the air, shouting, "He's proposing, Belinda, he's proposing." Only Tommy stood still, but in his eyes for the very first time shone the quiet trust John had longed for all these years. Belinda trembled, tears streaming freely. She hadn't yet spoken, but in her eyes everyone could already see it. This was destiny. A once powerful CEO, now on his knees before an ordinary woman, with 3 children, bearing witness a scene as heartbreaking as it was filled with hope. Silence blanketed the garden, broken only by the flutter of evening birds and Belinda's trembling breath. Before she could speak, Tommy suddenly took a step forward, his small hands clenched tightly together. "Belinda." His voice was hoarse, stripped of the angry edge it once carried. "If Dad is asking, then let me answer first." John froze while Belinda looked at Tommy with eyes overflowing with tenderness. Tommy drew in a sharp breath and spoke slowly, each word dragged from the depths of his heart. "I hated every nanny who came here, because I thought if I hated them enough, Mom would come back. But she didn't, and I made everyone leave. But Belinda, you didn't. You knelt down and looked at us like we were real, not just a burden. I want you to stay, not just as a nanny, but as a mom." Danny burst into tears, wrapping his arms tightly around Belinda from behind, pressing his face into her back. "I promise I won't make trouble anymore. I promise I'll learn how to love if you stay." "I swear it," Bobby stammered, his little voice bright as a silver bell. "I swear too. I'll even share my cookies with you, with everyone. I promise I'll call you Mommy if you want me to." Belinda broke down, no longer able to hide her tears. She knelt and gathered the 3 trembling children into her arms, holding them as though they were her own lifeline. John stood there, eyes burning red. A man who had once towered at the peak of power was now only a father witnessing a miracle, his children freely opening their hearts, giving the trust he had never been able to earn. That moment, the demon triplets of media headlines speaking vows of love to Belinda was enough to shatter the hardest of hearts. Belinda held them tighter, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Her chest ached with memories of long nights in the orphanage where she once cried alone, wishing for an embrace just like this. And today the miracle was that she had become that embrace for these children. She looked up through her tears and met John's gaze. The powerful CEO who once made the business world tremble was still kneeling, unable to hide the trembling in his eyes. She knew this moment was not only a proposal, but the surrender of his heart. Belinda slowly stood, pulling the children up with her. She stepped closer to John and without hesitation took his trembling hands that still held the ring. "John," her voice was gentle yet unyielding, "I never imagined life would bring me here to this house, to your heart and to the hearts of these 3 precious children. But now I understand. Destiny brought us together. I can't promise it will be easy. I can only promise this: whether storm or sunshine, I will not walk away. I will stay for the children and for you." She nodded softly, tears streaming, but her smile glowing bright. "Yes, I do. I will be your wife." The garden erupted. Danny screamed with joy, Bobby twirled in delight, and Tommy stood still, his eyes red, but his head bowed in quiet acceptance of something far greater than words. John's hands trembled as he slid the ring onto Belinda's finger, then clasped her hand firmly. He didn't need to say more. The love blazing in his eyes said everything. In that instant, a woman who had once been lost in life became the wife of a powerful CEO, but more importantly, the mother of 3 children. A moment so tender and overwhelming, it left every heart breaking and healing at once. When the ring settled on Belinda's hand, the garden fell into an almost sacred stillness. The sunset stretched like golden silk, casting its glow over the flower beds where Sarah once sat, laughing with her children. John held Belinda's hand tight while the 3 little ones gathered close, their eyes shining with a warmth never seen before. Tommy lifted his head, his voice trembling, yet firm. "Dad, Belinda, I think we need a vow too. A vow for the whole family." Danny cheered. "Yes, just like in the movies, but this time no one leaves." Bobby shot his hand, high, grinning ear to ear. "I swear first." John glanced at Belinda, and together they knelt down to meet their children eye to eye. He placed his hand in the center. Belinda laid hers on top, and 3 tiny hands stacked over theirs. All closed their eyes. Tommy, speaking for his brothers, whispered, "We vow never to forget Mom Sarah, but we also vow to open our hearts to love Mom Belinda. We vow to love each other, no matter if we fight, we'll always be a family." Danny added, his voice shaky but determined, "I vow not to make trouble anymore." "Well, at least I'll try. And I'll protect Bobby, protect Tommy, and protect Mommy Belinda too." Bobby giggled, his innocent voice ringing like a bell. "I vow to always share my cookies, and I vow to call us family forever." John's voice cracked as he joined in. "I vow never to let work or the world make me forget that the most precious thing is you and our children. I vow from this day on, we are one." Belinda pressed her hand to her heart, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I vow, whether in storms or in sunshine, I will stay, not just as your wife, but as the children's mother. Together, we will be reborn as a family." And then all 5 whispered in unison, "Family forever." The roses swayed gently in the evening breeze, as if bearing witness to the sacred promise. The garden that once held sorrow now became a place of rebirth, a place where a new family was born. A family once broken now stood hand in hand, bound by a vow of renewal. A scene so tender it drew tears, not only for the pain left behind, but for the happiness just beginning. Peace after the storm. Morning light stretched across the garden, the first rays slipping through the leaves and glinting off the lingering dew. Belinda sat on the old wooden bench, 3 little ones gathered in the warmth of her arms. Tommy rested his head on her shoulder. Danny clung tightly to her side, and Bobby sat fully in her lap, his tiny arms wrapped around her neck. John stood before them, his eyes of a man who had weathered storms now glimmered with profound gratitude. In his gaze lived not only love for Belinda, but also pride and relief, knowing that at last his family had found peace after the storm. A gentle breeze swept by, scattering rose petals across Belinda's shoulders. She looked up, smiling softly, and whispered, "Sometimes the hardest children to love are the ones who need love the most." Tommy lifted his head and asked quietly, "Then, we've found love now, haven't we?" Mommy Belinda's throat tightened as she pulled them closer. John answered for her, his voice deep, steady, but trembling. "Not just found, but kept. Because from now on, we'll never let it slip away again." In that moment, the shadows of loss seemed to dissolve, leaving only the sound of children's laughter echoing through the garden and the tender meeting of 2 grown hearts. A family, reborn, not perfect, but whole in love. Love is not the magic that erases pain. It is the light that gives us the courage to walk through the darkness. Do you believe love can heal every broken heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 to let us know how deeply it touched you. And remember to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next love story that may speak to your heart.